the quiet coastal town of Newport. Oregon is known for its pristine beaches, bustling fishing harbor, and the tranquil beauty of Yaquina Bay. But from more than 22 years ago, in the dying days of 2001, that tranquility was shattered forever when this peaceful community became the stage for one of the most unsettling family annihilation cases in modern American history. This is the story of Christian Longo, a man whose elaborate web of lies culminated in the calculated murder of his entire family. Crime so cold and complete that it shook the nation. Before the horror unfolded, the Longo family looked, by all appearances, perfectly normal. Christian Longo, then 27, was charismatic, articulate, and well-dressed. He moved with his wife, MaryJane, or MJ, and their 3 beautiful young children to a quiet apartment complex in Newport. There was 4-year-old Madison, the eldest, 3-year-old Zachary, the baby, 2-year-old Sadie. To the outside world, they were just another young family trying to make a fresh start. But behind the facade, a dark and toxic reality was festering. Christian Longo wasn't the successful, hardworking businessman he pretended to be. He was a fraudster, a colossal failure cloaked in designer clothes. Longo had amassed enormous, crippling debt. He had a history of bouncing checks, falsifying resumes, and lying about everything from his education to his employment history. He had convinced MaryJane and himself that they were constantly on the verge of success. But in reality, they were drowning, financially and morally. They had already fled their previous home in Michigan to escape mounting legal and financial pressure. Newport was supposed to be their final, desperate attempt at normalcy. By December 2001, the weight of the lies became unbearable. The debt collectors were closing in. Longo's financial schemes were collapsing, and then made a decision that is still almost incomprehensible, rather than face the humiliation and consequences of his failures. He chose to eliminate the proof of his life entirely. On December 19, 2001, Christian Longo packed his bags and vanished from Newport. He left a message for acquaintances. His wife, MaryJane, had supposedly abandoned him and taken the children to Michigan. Longo claimed he was traveling to sort things out. But something about his story didn't sit right. When investigators finally checked the Longo apartment, they found it strangely empty. Most of the family's belongings were gone, but there was no sign of a struggle, only an unnerving silence. A few days later, the investigation took a gruesome turn. On the morning of December 19th, a fisherman working on Yaquina Bay spotted something floating near the shore. It was the body of a small child weighted down, purposefully sunk. It was later identified as 4-year-old Madison Longo. This was not a drowning accident. The children had been methodically killed and disposed of. Over the next few days, the horror multiplied. The bodies of 3-year-old Zachary and 2-year-old Sadie were recovered from the cold waters of the bay, like their sister. They had been tied to heavy objects, confirming a brutal, calculated intent to ensure they would never surface. Each discovery was a fresh, agonizing blow to the small community and to the investigators trying to piece together the final, horrifying moments of these young lives. But MaryJane Longo was still missing. Her body was eventually found not in the bay, but in a wooded area outside of town. She had been strangled. The timeline became sickeningly clear. Sometime around December 17th or 18th, Christian Longo had systematically murdered his wife and his 3 children. The motive, authorities concluded, was purely selfish. To escape accountability for his fraudulent life and start completely fresh, free of the financial and personal burdens his family represented. He saw them not as loved ones, but as obstacles to his freedom. As the bodies were identified, the hunt for Christian Longo began. It quickly became an international manhunt, fueled by outrage and disbelief. Longo, meanwhile, had executed his escape plan flawlessly. He used a false identity and slipped across the border into Mexico, heading straight for the sunny tourist hub of Cancun. Longo was sophisticated enough to know how to disappear, but perhaps not self-aware enough to recognize his own hubris. He tried to blend in, adopting the persona of a travel writer, a journalist, even charming other tourists he met. He was enjoying the freedom he had bought with for lives. His undoing came in January 2002. A group of American and Canadian tourists in Cancun, who had been following the case closely on the news, recognized Longo from an episode of America's Most Wanted. The tip was immediately relayed to authorities. Christian Longo was arrested, still maintaining his charming, innocent demeanor, protesting his innocence right up until he was extradited back to the United States. Once back in Oregon, Longo's strategy was pure deception. He offered a dizzying series of shifting stories. First, he claimed MaryJane had left him, taking the children. Then, once faced with the evidence of the bodies, his story changed dramatically. He claimed that MaryJane, driven to despair by their financial ruin, had actually killed the children, and that he, in a fit of grief and rage, had then killed her. It was a vicious attempt to paint himself as the secondary victim, the one forced to act under extreme duress. But the prosecutors had evidence that dismantled every single lie. The methodical way the bodies were weighted and disposed of pointed not to a spontaneous, panicked reaction, but to cold, calculated planning. Expert testimony proved that the children had been suffocated or strangled first, then placed in the water. The physical evidence simply did not support Longo's narrative of a distraught mother acting alone. The trial, which began in 2003, was agonizing for the community and for MaryJane's surviving family. Longo remained composed, even emotionless throughout the proceedings. When he took the stand, his composure only further highlighted his disturbing lack of empathy. The jury quickly found Christian Longo guilty of 4 counts of aggravated murder. He was sentenced to death, a sentence that was later converted to life in prison. Without the possibility of parole after Oregon revised its capital punishment laws, the case of Christian Longo serves as a chilling testament to the dangers of pure, unadulterated narcissism. He was a man obsessed with appearances, so terrified of being exposed as a failure that he chose to extinguish the very lives he was supposed to protect. His actions were not born of momentary insanity, but of a calculated choice to prioritize his own freedom. Over the lives of his wife and his children, the quiet waters of Yaquina Bay, where the bodies of the Longo children were discovered, will forever carry the weight of that betrayal. It remains a haunting spot, a permanent reminder that sometimes the most dangerous monsters hide in plain sight, wearing the face of a devoted father. If you found this deep dive into true crime history compelling, please hit that like button, subscribe for more unsettling stories, and let me know in the comments what other historical cases you'd like us to explore next. Thanks for watching.